Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you're part of our journey. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and get ready for a story that will leave you thinking. And if you love inspiring tales, a like goes a long way. You call this service? Maybe McDonald's is more your speed. The words sliced through the quiet cafe, sharp as knives. Every customer froze, forks suspended midair, conversations halted. The young waitress stood motionless, coffee pot trembling slightly in her grip. Rain tapped gently against foggy windows as the cafe's yellow lights cast long shadows across worn tables. The businessman's Italian leather briefcase gleamed beside his untouched meal, his diamond cufflinks catching light with every dismissive gesture. Sarah's name tag was slightly crooked, her textbooks visible behind the counter. In the far corner, partially hidden by shadows, a man in a black jacket watched. His bearded face remained expressionless, but his eyes, those eyes that millions would recognize, narrowed slightly. What happened next would be shared hundreds of thousands of times, teaching a lesson about respect that money could never buy. If this moment made you feel something, imagine what's coming next. Hit that like button and stay with us. Subscribe now. Sarah Matthews had been on her feet for 11 hours straight. Her psychology textbook lay open behind the counter, highlighted passages a testament to her determination. 23 years old, working nights to pay for her master's degree, she'd learned to wear a smile even when her feet screamed in protest. Tonight was different. The businessman in the corner booth had sent back his order twice already, each return accompanied by progressively louder commentary about incompetence and basic standards. His voice carried the practiced ease of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question, a man who measured others' worth by their ability to serve him flawlessly. The cafe manager, Mike, hovered anxiously near the kitchen, his eyes darting between the irate customer and the door. The man's watch alone probably cost more than the cafe's monthly revenue. Regulars exchanged uncomfortable glances, some staring intently at their plates, others watching with the reluctant fascination of witnesses to a slow-motion car crash. When Sarah approached with his third attempt at the properly prepared salmon, her hands trembled slightly. Is serving food correctly really beyond your capabilities? The businessman's voice cut through ambient conversations, deliberately loud enough for everyone to hear. Or is mediocrity the standard in establishments like this? The cafe fell silent, the only sounds the gentle patter of rain and the soft jazz playing through aging speakers. In the far corner, partially obscured by shadows, Keanu Reeves set down his coffee cup. He'd stopped here seeking quiet anonymity between filming locations, a simple moment of normalcy in a life that rarely allowed it. For 20 minutes, he'd watched the businessman's performance with increasing discomfort. There was something painfully familiar in Sarah's polite smile, a dignity maintained under fire that reminded him of his own sister's struggles years ago. He observed how she squared her shoulders after each verbal assault, watched her discreetly wipe away a tear when she thought no one was looking. Something shifted in his expression when the businessman's voice rose again, demanding to speak to a manager. It wasn't the cold determination of John Wick or Neo's calculated resolve. This was something entirely personal, entirely human. Things are about to take a turn. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe, like our video, and keep watching. This is completely unacceptable, the businessman announced, pushing his plate away with theatrical disgust. His voice had the practiced projection of someone who believed volume equaled authority. I've waited 40 minutes for food that any competent chef could prepare in 10. Sarah stood with her hands clasped before her, knuckles white with restraint. A smartphone rose from a nearby table. Someone had begun recording. The businessman noticed and seemed to grow more animated, performing now for a potential audience beyond the cafe walls. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect basic competence when I'm paying good money. He gestured toward Sarah's name tag. Though I suppose if you had any real skills, you wouldn't be serving tables, would you? A collective intake of breath rippled through the room. The manager approached, apologies already forming on his lips, his posture submissive. "Sir, please accept our sincere... Actually, I'd like to speak." The voice was quiet but carried an unmistakable gravity. Conversations halted mid-sentence as heads turned toward the corner table. The man who stood wasn't immediately recognizable. His beard was fuller than in recent films, his hair slightly longer, but there was something in his bearing that commanded attention. He moved with the unhurried confidence of someone who knew his voice would be heard regardless of volume. As he stepped into better light, recognition dawned across faces throughout the cafe. Whispers rippled. "Is that... It can't be. Keanu Reeves?" The businessman's expression flickered between confusion and the instinctive recalibration of someone suddenly unsure of their social standing. The manager's mouth opened slightly, coffee pot forgotten in his hand. Sarah remained frozen, her eyes widening as Keanu approached. 3 more phones rose to record what was happening, their owners barely breathing as he passed. The cafe's atmosphere had transformed entirely, the air electric with anticipation. Keanu stood beside Sarah now, his presence somehow both imposing and gentle. "I've been sitting here for the past hour," he said, his voice carrying that distinctive cadence millions would recognize. "And I've seen this young woman endure what no one should have to while doing their job." His eyes met Sarah's briefly, a look of quiet solidarity, before returning to the businessman. The man attempted to recover, straightening his tie. "Mr. Reeves, I'm simply expecting the standard of service that any paying customer..." Keanu raised his hand slightly, a minimal gesture that somehow silenced the room more effectively than a shout. "What I've witnessed isn't about service standards." His voice remained measured, reasonable. "It's about human dignity." The businessman's confident facade began cracking at its edges, his audience no longer the captive group he'd imagined. Every phone was recording now, documenting a moment that would soon reach millions. This story is only getting deeper. What would you do in this situation? Comment below, and let's talk. "You know," Keanu began, "I worked as a busboy once, and my sister waited tables for years while struggling with leukemia." His tone carried no accusation, just a simple statement of facts. The hardest part for her wasn't the physical exhaustion or the long hours. It was being treated as if she were somehow less human because of the job she did. The cafe had fallen into complete silence, even the kitchen staff now standing in doorways, witnesses to something unfolding that transcended celebrity sighting into something profoundly human. Sarah stood straighter beside him, something in her posture shifting from defense to dignity. The businessman's eyes darted toward the exit, his social calculus visibly recalibrating. "I certainly didn't mean to," Keanu continued as if he hadn't heard the interruption. "You know what impressed me today? How this young woman maintained her composure and dignity while being treated without any..." His hand gestured toward Sarah's textbooks behind the counter. "She's working towards something, just like we all are. Success isn't about how much money you make, or the power you think it gives you," Keanu continued, his voice carrying that thoughtful quality that had endeared him to millions. "It's about how you impact the lives around you." He turned to Sarah, asking gently, "What are you studying?" Her voice emerged surprisingly steady. "Clinical psychology, focusing on trauma recovery." Keanu nodded, a genuine smile warming his features. "That's important work. He turned back to the businessman. More important than most of what happens in boardrooms. The businessman's face had flushed deep red, his hand unconsciously covering his expensive watch. The performance he'd been giving had found an unexpected audience, with a script he hadn't prepared for. The power dynamic had shifted completely. A murmur of approval rippled through the cafe, someone in the back beginning to applaud softly. "We all have bad days," Keanu acknowledged, "but they're never an excuse to diminish someone else's humanity." The businessman stood abruptly, reaching for his wallet. "Allow me to settle my bill," he muttered, extracting several bills. Keanu shook his head slowly. "Money doesn't fix this kind of thing." His words weren't harsh, but carried the weight of sincere conviction. An apology might be a start, though. A tense moment passed, the entire cafe holding its breath. Then something unexpected happened. The businessman's shoulders slumped slightly, as if a weight he'd been carrying extended beyond this single interaction. "You're right," he said quietly, turning to Sarah. "I've been inexcusably rude. The food was fine. I've been taking a bad day out on you. I'm sorry." The apology wasn't theatrical or excessive, but had the ring of genuine realization. Sarah nodded, her own expression softening slightly. "Thank you. I appreciate that." Applause broke out, spreading through the cafe like a wave. Someone called out, "Keanu for president!" generating laughter that broke the remaining tension. The businessman gathered his belongings with newfound humility, avoiding eye contact as he made his way toward the exit. "It's not over yet. The best part is coming. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it." As the businessman departed, the cafe erupted in excited chatter. Keanu turned to Sarah, speaking quietly so only she could hear. "I hope that helps." She smiled, genuine this time. "More than you know." The manager approached, practically vibrating with nervousness and gratitude. "Mr. Reeves, your meal is absolutely on the house tonight. Anything you'd like?" Keanu shook his head. "Just the coffee is fine, thanks. But maybe consider something else." He glanced meaningfully towards Sarah. "Your staff deserves better backup when customers cross lines." The manager nodded rapidly, genuine understanding dawning on his face. "Yes, absolutely. You're right." Keanu returned to his table as customers approached Sarah, offering words of support and admiration. Several left larger tips than usual, but more importantly, they saw her, really saw her, perhaps for the first time. By morning, videos of the interaction had spread across social media platforms. Keanu Respect and Chakra Dignity Matters trended worldwide. Commenters shared similar experiences in service industries, creating conversations about human dignity that transcended celebrity involvement. News outlets picked up the story. Keanu Reeves stands up for waitress in powerful moment, and Hollywood star delivers masterclass in respect. The cafe experienced an unexpected surge in visitors. People coming not just hoping to spot Keanu, but because they wanted to support a business associated with treating workers with dignity. Sarah received numerous messages of support, including several scholarship offers from psychology programs impressed with her composure. The businessman, whose face had been mostly blurred in the viral videos, sent an anonymous donation to a service worker support fund along with a note. "A lesson learned that changed my perspective." 1 week later, Sarah sat in her psychology ethics class discussing power dynamics in therapeutic relationships. Her professor used the now viral video as an example of intervention ethics. "Sometimes standing beside someone is more powerful than standing in front of them," he noted. Sarah smiled, thinking of how Keanu had positioned himself, not as a savior, but as an ally. That evening at the cafe, now wearing an assistant manager name tag, she trained a new server. "Remember, everyone who walks through that door deserves respect," she explained, "but so do you." The rain had returned, tapping gently against windows now adorned with a small handwritten sign, "All who enter here will be treated with dignity." The lesson lingered longer than the celebrity encounter, a ripple effect of kindness that continued expanding long after the cameras stopped recording. In a world obsessed with status and power, a simple reminder had gone viral. True respect isn't measured by wealth or fame, but by how we treat each person we encounter along life's journey. Wow, what a story! If this moved you, imagine what else we have for you. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and let us know what you think.